people start joining us. Welcome everyone that is clicking through today on your lunchtime. I hope you've got a delicious treat, other than the visual and oral treat that Josh and I will be for your ears this afternoon. Lovely. So yeah, welcome to everyone that's joining us. You can see Josh and myself on screen. We are only here for half an hour, so we will blitz through this, and thank you for all being so prompt, because you're already a minute early, which is great. As you're joining, please do kind of go along the bottom of your screen on Zoom, select the chat option, open that up, and if you change the settings to all panelists and attendees, and it would be really good for you to introduce yourself as you come on, and perhaps, I guess what would be useful, Josh, is if they could tell us their income stream as well, because then what I will forcibly do is make Josh completely edit how he was going to deliver the presentation to suit the income streams that are on here. No pressure, Josh.
No pressure whatsoever, but it's totally open to that. Yeah, we can speak about any way that digital could make your program better. Always happy.
Yeah, so do introduce yourself and your income stream. That would be really, really helpful. Those of you who are joining, I know there are a few that came on to our one back in November now with Josh and I, at which point I'm sure we were saying we would all be going back to a normal life and we could forget about digital. No, that was the message you said, don't forget about digital. So here we are, just with the refresher of lockdown 3.0. Who knows how long we're going to be doing this, and highlighting the best ways for you to speak to your supporters. Josh, who's on your screen, is the integrated marketing lead at Ecosia. I met Josh 5 years ago when he first moved over to the UK and helped him secure a couple of roles within the charity sector. And since then, Josh has moved into the social enterprise space, covering digital, paid and integrated marketing at Ecosia, and he is also setting up and running his own consultancy now, which is excellent. So he's working with a couple of charities at the moment. We'll have all of his details shared at the end, so if you need any support within your team, he is your go-to guy, and you'll have all of that at the end. I'm being very brief because we do only have half an hour, so I will just say about Ashby Jenkins Recruitment as well. So for those of you who've not worked with me before, we're a specialist agency across fundraising, ops, digital and innovation roles across the entire UK, and we take a relationship-led approach to recruitment, hence why I've known Josh for so long and refused to leave his life. He's moved to Germany. I'm still in touch with him. So if you're looking for a new role, or you are hiring into your team and struggling, please do get in touch. Welcome again to everyone. As I said, for those of you who just recently joined, do introduce yourself and your income stream. It would be really helpful for the content. And that's all done in 2 minutes, which is super quick for me. Normally I rattle on. So let's go into sharing the screen and going into the presentation. So you should all have that up with you now. And Josh, I'll hand over to you, and you can just direct me as to when to click, and I'll see what I can do.
Stunning. Just a quick one, Ashby, you got me every job I had in the UK. Ashby Jenkins Recruitment, use them, love them. The relationship-led approach to recruitment is stunning, and I couldn't recommend Ashby more highly. And I'm not just saying that because she lets me bore you all with digital webinars. So yes, let's dive right in. As Ashby said, we've only got half an hour together. So just to give you a sense of what we're about to look at, there's a lot of sort of creative and strategic tips and tricks in here on how to add digital to your program. There are a lot of resources embedded in the slides as well, so we can send the slides around afterwards, and there might be some slides that we move through quite quickly, but you can always click through, or you can reach out to me afterwards and we can have a bit more of a chat about what could work for you guys. So did you think you could forget about digital? I mean, that's it. Over to the next slide. Here's what we're going to cover today. Is we're going to look at adding digital to a direct marketing appeal. And just to stress, this doesn't mean direct mail only, but direct marketing. Anything where you've got a one-to-one sort of mass approach to your user base. Having said that, if anyone has any other specific income streams, we can always talk about that on the fly. I might know a few things. We'll see. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital acquisition as part of that. Investing in engagement before you make the ask. This is something that a lot of people talk about, and it is increasingly becoming something that nonprofits are aware of, investing in your brand and considering that a legitimate expense. In digital, it's more important than ever for a couple of really specific reasons that I'll cover off later. And setting targets and managing expectations. So I'm going to leave you with a few resources to actually build out a forecast so that you can get that crucial approval internally to invest in digital as part of your program. So Ashby, if we jump over to the next slide, which is a real quick one.
Yeah, and just to say, everyone, if you want to ask questions as we go through, please feel free. We'll try and cover them quickly, but if not, then as Josh said, you can pick up with him afterwards. Sorry, just to interrupt.
Totally. But first, there are 3 ideas I want you to hold on to. So these are just real quick, but Ashby, to the next one. The first one is this 2 grain silos. They represent fundraising and digital. For a lot of you, your organizations, you might recognize this split. Unfortunately, some of the bigger organizations, but even smaller ones, have quite a divide between what is considered digital and what's considered fundraising. My biggest advice to you is to knock that wall down. Come in like a wrecking ball, as the great Miley Cyrus once said. Knock that wall down. I, in the past, have done this by attending the digital team's weekly editorial meeting and just making sure that there's really a flow of information between the 2 teams and a mutual respect. It's really, really crucial that you do that to bring digital into your fundraising. Over to the second point. This would look quite familiar to a lot of people as well. It's quite a linear approach to how you'd run a campaign or an appeal. So you would choose your channel first, segment your data second, and then make the ask third. But Ashby, if we go to the next slide, I really want us to think about more this hodgepodge approach, which is about creating an ecosystem of engagement and content and asks so that you're really building up to the ask of your audience, retaining them better, and really respecting the audience and putting them at the heart of everything that we do. And then to the third and final point, which is quite a positive one, is just to address the elephant in the room, which is COVID. So we obviously started this year going into a tier 4 lockdown, wave 3.0, wherever we are on the COVID journey. Just to address that with some data from CAF Online, from the Charities Aid Foundation, that looks at the March through August period 2019 and the March through August period 2020. Charitable donations did not go down. Sponsorship did a little bit, and virtual events is a whole other conversation we can have. There's loads of really amazing virtual events that are happening, but when it comes to individual giving or any other forms of giving, charitable donations haven't gone down. They haven't plummeted into the ground. You might find that they're coming through in a different way or through a different channel or in a different way within your organization. But people are still actively giving and willing to give. And it's up to us to really make sure that we're relevant to what they want to give to, or that we're really addressing their needs, which is on the next slide, Ashby. This is just a little bit of data here to show that increasingly people are in online spaces, and what they're doing is accessing entertainment. They are watching video, increasingly a lot of video. They're reading the news across every age group, but especially that older demographic that we tend to go for in the nonprofit space. They are increasingly using the internet to get to their news and current affairs. So really, we just want to make sure that we're going to where they are and speaking to them in the right places at the right time in the right way. I think that there's a misconception that old people aren't online, etc. Throw that all out, pretend it's just forget it all, unlearn it. So Ashby, over to the next slide. This is just a summary of what we've learned. We need to act as a single brand, not as silos. We need to put our audience at the heart of everything we do, and we need to meet them where they are. So those are 3 things that will really help you get your digital program either started or escalated.
And just on this, Josh, sorry, some of the things that we're seeing even from those bigger charities that you mentioned, so Shelter, for example, is integrating their digital and their individual giving team, which have separately or previously sat quite separately, but they're kind of looking at integrating those more. So we are starting to see the big charities recognise this and move on it.
Amazing. And what that means is that even recruiting through Ashby, really thinking about your skill set and really looking at how to sell yourself into a role where you might need to know more digital, or recognizing that you have a lot of strength coming from a traditional fundraising background around testing methodology and things like that, that a lot of digital people just don't know. There's a lot of skill share that goes both ways there.
I've told you that every time you mention recruiting through me, you get a tenner, haven't I, Josh? So we'll see how many times.
It might be have 20 quid at the end of this call.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. Yeah. So when we think about where to start with digital, I'm going to focus primarily on 2 channels on this particular webinar, as we don't have a lot of time, but just to give you a bit of a rationale as to why. So this is some data from an agency called We Are Social. They're a global social media agency. They've been partnering with Hootsuite, which is a social listening tool, for a couple of years now to do this regular, I think it's a quarterly digital report. What you'll see here is that the Facebook audience, globally speaking, is the biggest audience in all of the digital kingdom. And then a couple down from there is Instagram, which is also a really, really significant audience size. The ones between the 2 are primarily messaging apps that you can't advertise in, or YouTube, which is, again, a whole other webinar we can talk about. So the reason, I just want to show you the reason I'm going to be talking a lot about Facebook and Instagram advertising today, as opposed to things like display advertising or other areas. And then over to the next slide is just to also show you, this is some data from M&R benchmarks. So M&R are a US-based data. They do, the M&R benchmarks report is an annual report from M&R in the US. They do this data mining about digital fundraising. I believe they're coming to the UK as well, or they're already in the UK, but they're working with Alder Gregorio, I think, on that. Don't quote me on that. But essentially, this just shows you that the social media ROI that you can get, or the cost per acquisition on social media is completely acceptable cost per acquisition. It could be higher or lower than some of the other channels, but it is a really good channel to use when you compare it to other digital channels. So really focusing on paid social media. And then the other channel I want to talk about is on the next slide is email. So I know a lot of you will already have email programs, but that might sit with your digital team or your comms team or any other team in the organization, but really thinking about how to bring digital into your fundraising and into your donor user journey. So this is some data specifically from the UK last year on Statista, and you can see that that older age group is still using email. There's a really high penetration of email users, particularly in the 55 to 64 category. It does go down a little from there, but essentially this is just to show you that older people are using email as much as younger people, if not more than some of the younger demographics. So it's a totally legitimate channel to use for this audience as well, and I'd highly recommend it. I'm going to show you some examples of good storytelling in email, because I think people might feel like if it's not tangible on a 2 to 4 sided letter, it's just not going to hit the mark. But actually, you can do some really interesting things with email to tell the story or to garnish the story. So over to the next slide. So we've got our channels. Thinking about the methodology for this, or the way that we can really bring this to life, if you were to do, I'm going to use direct mail again, but as I said earlier, this is about direct marketing. So anything that you're doing to communicate with people, if you were to do to grab your data file and you've got all of your DM addresses on there, your direct mail addresses, also think about the email addresses you have or any of the additional data you have. And then Ashby, if you hit that right arrow one more time, back again. Also think about getting that into paid social. So there are some audiences in paid social, some targeting categories I'm going to show you that are really, really interesting. And it's a really tangible way to tell the same case study and the same story to the same people in a few different channels at the same time. And really what you're doing is creating an entire narrative for them. They will then be able to convert on one or the other. DM might have a really high average cash gift that you get. So you might want to maybe use paid social for engagement, or vice versa. You might want to maybe reduce the number of DM you're sending and actually focus a little bit of that cash, that spend, on paid social for certain segments of your data. So really considering paid social and email as legitimate channels to reach people in, and then doing some experimentation to get your average gift up. And then over to the next slide. What if I don't have the data I need? Just wanted to quickly address this for anyone who does have any concerns. I've got some tips and tricks here, but look at adding GDPR compliant data capture to your response mechanisms. So if you send a regular direct mail appeal, look to add something to your coupon or to your the response device. The other word skips. In Australia, we call it a coupon. To the coupon. You could look to add some data capture there, so maybe capturing an email address or a phone number, a mobile phone number for any SMS marketing. It's a really great opportunity to incentivize that as well. So really telling the supporter what they're going to get in that email. So give them a little flash of the kind of story they might hear, or a little peek at a piece of video, like a still from a video they might be able to see by email if they sign up. Also think about that in your TM scripts, if you've got a physical insert you're sending out, and give some territory to data capture. And then, yeah, any response mechanism, look for opportunities to build out the data you have on file so that you can start bringing digital into your program. Consider a regular supporter survey. This is another really good tactic. It is a great retention piece. It's a really great way to build out information about your supporter base, but it is also a great way to capture additional contact data, or additional data is GDPR compliant for you to reach out to them in some other channels. In Australia, a lot of big charities do a survey every 2 years. I know in the UK it's not as common, but I saw a lot of them in the lead up to the introduction of GDPR. It's a really great way to reaching out to people, to getting them engaged as well. And the third one was to kind of a different approach to this through your acquisition, is to run a value exchange campaign. And I'm going to show you an example of that later, but really building data first and then the ask second. But actually what you've done is you've paid for your cash gift or your regular gift sign up. You've paid for the acquisition. You've also got that data with it. Whereas typically you would have to pay for data as well. So a couple of tips there. And if anyone wanted to speak specifically about building out the data that you hold on your files, specifically to get some digital program going, reach out to me afterwards and we can have a chat about that as well. Sorry, I am racing through this, but it's a whistle-stop tour, I told you. If anyone is concerned, which is legitimate, if anyone's concerned around how their audience might perceive these data asks, I just wanted to show you a little more data from the We Are Social digital report. It shows that the UK does index above average, globally speaking, for concerns around misuse of data. And what I would say here is to address that, just make sure that you're being really clear and tangible about what you are going to do with that data, which is a GDPR requirement, but also look for opportunities to say to people, if you give us your email address, you will receive video content, you will receive audio content, you'll receive additional premium stuff that nobody else is getting, which, and I mean, obviously, and then deliver on that, which I know that you will, I trust you all. But yeah, this isn't a negative thing. It's just to say that while there are concerns, there could be concerns in your target audience about this, treat it as an opportunity to really add some depth to the relationship you have with them and just be totally transparent about the way you can use that data. Over to the next slide. So getting started with Facebook Business Manager, I've kind of pitched this at a level where you might not have a program or you have a program and you want to look to optimize it. So I'm going to go through in a bit of a chronological order, but the next slide actually is just the first one to say this is what Facebook Business Manager looks like. It is a self-service tool, but I would recommend maybe getting some training or some support on using it. You could look for freelance support. You could take that training yourself and deliver the activity yourself. It's not a high resource channel, but it is higher resource than some of the other channels you might be using for acquisition or retention. There's a link on this slide to a blog called Ad Espresso. I shamefully use Ad Espresso a lot because they do a lot of testing. And if I come up with a test idea, I tend to go to Ad Espresso first and find that they dropped €1,000 over a couple of weeks on doing a quick test to actually get some learnings that would be relevant to what I was thinking. But they also have loads of resources to get started on this kind of stuff. But again, reach out to me afterwards if you want a bit of a hands-on tour of Facebook Business Manager, and I can really help out with that as well. So I'm not going to cover too much more on the admin side of that. It could be that you might prefer some more hands-on training. What I did want to show you, and this loops back to what I was saying earlier about how to build digital into your existing activity, is a specific kind of audience targeting on Facebook called custom audience. Sorry if anyone's already heard of this. I'm going to go through it as if you haven't or as if you know, but these are a couple of extra ways to think about it. But custom audience lets you create a very targeted specific audience based on existing data you have. So you could import your warm files. So you've done your warm selections. You know that this individual, you want to reach them on DM, you want to reach them on telephone, you want to reach them on this, you want to reach them on that, and you want to run some Facebook ads. You can import that file into Facebook, and then it will match that to their Facebook profile, and it will target them with advertising. That is the warm version. The cold version is to create complete new audiences, which are not custom audiences, but are based on various other types of targeting categories that we'll see on the next slide. But I wanted to point out these ones in the middle that I've just called tepid. I don't know if anyone else says that, but it's kind of like jumping into a bath and the water's been there for a little bit longer. So it's a tepid audience. What I mean with these ones are you can create audiences based on web traffic. So if someone has visited your website but didn't convert, you could actually follow up with them to try and recover the conversion. If someone's visited your website and they did convert, then you could actually use that to have a further conversation with them and really invest in some retention activity so that in the first 5 days, you know that they're going to be directed to some content you posted on your blog or to a video you've got or something similar. And then another tepid one is engagement. So this is essentially anyone who's liked your page, watched certain videos on your page, and you can actually choose specific videos, or they've watched a percentage of the video. So there's a lot of granularity to targeting in digital that you just don't get in other channels. It's a little bit creepy, but I'll talk about that in a second actually around privacy policy. But on the right side of this page, I've also shown you the kind of data that is related to. So a customer file would be that you're importing emails. Web traffic is you've got what's called a pixel on your homepage. This is a piece of Facebook HTML code that will feed information back to the Facebook advertising platform. And then the final one is just having a Facebook page. So if you were concerned around the privacy of, or the potential privacy violation of having email imported, then the pixel is a more anonymized version, and then the page is the most anonymized version. But this kind of audience is really about speaking to the right people at the right time and knowing where they are in that ecosystem of engagement with your brand. If we jump to the next slide, Ashby. Ooh. I thought I had another one in there on privacy. Just to address any concerns around privacy policy. So this is something I really would stress, that you have to think about your privacy policy before you import data into Facebook. Facebook is GDPR compliant. This particular kind of audience targeting is GDPR compliant. Just make sure that you've been expressly clear with your user base or your supporter base about that. So again, it's something I could help point you in the right direction, but I don't necessarily want to be advising on GDPR, on your privacy policy. Have a chat with your GDPR lead internally, and they can really give you the right advice on that. I know that some nonprofits haven't quite jumped into the custom audience pool yet, whereas others are in there and they're just splashing around loving life. So we have covered off the audience targeting. I'm going to take us through a couple of examples of creative, and just, I really want to address how digital creative is a little bit different to traditional creative, but actually that there's opportunities in this. And it's the kind of creative that you could, if you were briefing in with your creative agency or your designer, you were briefing in a direct mail pack, you could also speak to that same designer and that same copywriter about producing some digital for you. And increasingly, a lot of designers and copywriters are able to do that. They just don't always get the brief for it. But if you're briefing in an appeal, think about your universal brief being about your concept, the audience you're going to reach, and then describing the fact that you're going to reach them in several different channels, and then giving the designer the opportunity to create something, a DM pack plus an acquisition pack plus some acquisition digital activity plus an email plus a landing page. So really that continuity between everything is going to be important, which I'll touch on in a second as well. But thinking specifically about advertising on Facebook, it is quite different, obviously, to a 2 to 4 page letter with several inserts, a response mechanism, a reply paid envelope, and a stamp. It is also quite different to a 6 pp roll fold insert. It's a really unique channel. It's really different. The copy is shorter and punchier. You know who your audience is to an uncanny level of detail. And so you've got the opportunity to serve multiple different creatives that really address the different segments that you're speaking to. With an acquisition program, you might do a huge data buy or get a ton of insert titles bought. You might do 2 or 3 different creative variants and test them against each other, but you might just smattergun them across every one of those titles. Digital lets you do similar testing methodology faster and cheaper, and then you can roll that learning out and scale it much better and get those results much quicker. So digital is a tool for those short bursts of campaign activity, but also as an always-on program as well. So just a couple of tips I've got here is you want to make sure your image stops the scroll, because people are scrolling in a news feed, whether that be on desktop or on mobile. Use active direct copy, so if you're writing the copy yourself, but even if you're working with a copywriter, knowing how to recognize an active sentence, which is I did blah, instead of a passive sentence, blah was did by me. That's not good English. Don't listen to my copy advice. But essentially, yeah, keep an eye out on the copy that's being created for you and the image choices. It needs to really catch attention, because these channels, unlike an insert that might be one, I mean, depends on how many inserts titles are selling. If they've got 50 inserts, that doesn't happen, but they might have a lot of inserts, but digital is really a channel where every 4th post could be an ad. So it's just something to think about. How are you going to stop the scroll and get attention, and then turn that into a conversion? Test, 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 even down to the CTA button as well. So that button there that says donate now, that could say learn more, it could say sign up, it could say loads of other things. But really, as I said earlier, this is a place for you to bring all of that really strong testing methodology that you already have as a direct marketing fundraiser, be that acquisition, retention, any other channel that you're working in. If you're managing a shop, no matter what you're doing, you will have a wealth of knowledge that is totally useful in digital, and a lot of digital people may not even have that. So yeah, you have got a lot of that testing methodology there, and that's golden, and you should bring that to your digital channels. Be aware that copy cuts off. So no, I had a different example in a different slide deck I did where you could really clearly see that the copy just came to an abrupt halt. So digital does have some, that was just a showcase that digital has some limitations. So really it's short and punchy. If we go to the next slide.
Out of interest, Josh, so obviously these campaigns are live, they end a lot quicker. So whereas when you mail it out, like that lands on their doorstep, it might be relevant for longer, or there's a longer lead time. How on top of people's copy should they be? Because I was definitely seeing ads that had Christmas messaging still live in January this year. So do you think that's falling through the gap a little bit? Do people need to be more aware of that?
I think that's falling through the gap, and I don't think there's a good enough excuse for still having Christmas messaging well into January. Digital gives you the ability to be so reactive. You could literally update your advertising based on headlines in the morning news. And I don't know, it depends on how much resource and capacity you have. If you're working with an external agency, I'd really look for opportunities for localization, personalization, timeliness. Having Christmas ads running in January, that's a no from me. Obviously, you can't control that in a DM pack. That pack could sit on the doorstep for a few days and then live on the dining table for a week and then eventually be addressed in January. But with digital, you've got the world is at your fingertips. I would keep an eye on that. You can create as well evergreen, always on creative, which is a different thing. a different approach where you might look at doing a much more complicated testing plan to really get to a place where you know what works. But if it's about augmenting an appeal, that's where you've got a shorter, sharper burst of activity, and you really want to just focus on making it timely, relevant, and local. Don't run Christmas ads in January.
Organisations need to maybe review their sign-off processes, because if you've got really heavy where it has to go to the director of fundraising or whatever, or even be signed off by the trustees, it's just not feasible for this to be a live kind of campaign, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, when I've worked, when I was at Open and worked with clients on campaigns where they would have a direct mail pack and a few other things, a full integrated campaign, and they also did digital, it would be created in one pack and approved as a single set of creative. And I'd really recommend treating digital as another one of your executions, not a nice to have on the side, but really putting it in your stack of creative that you're preparing, and make sure that it's part of that approval process. The added benefit to that is that you will have continuity in how you're telling the story throughout the entire appeal. So the same individual is going to see that on their doorstep, on the TV, hear it on the radio, maybe out-of-home advertising, whatever, and they'll see it on digital. And if you do it that way, you're going to really be sure that you've got the same images, the same headlines, the same concept coming clearly through at every stage. This is the slide I lost a second ago, but this is what I wanted to show. On top of using custom audiences, you can also target a lot of cold audiences. So really looking at using Facebook for acquisition, really thinking about, say, for example, you do a buy in a bunch of media titles. You could use the same methodology for actually finding the right people with their demographics and, crucially, their interests on Facebook. So people's interests are documented in Facebook, and you can target based on them. So I just wanted to say that Facebook gives you, it is a tool for acquisition and retention and. It's a tool for everything. But a note, the smaller, more specific your audience is, the higher the CPM, which is the cost per 1,000 impressions, which is the same way you buy a lot of cold media. Over to the next slide. This is just to say that Facebook has an online platform called Facebook Blueprint, and there's a link to it in this slide. So click on that when you get this through. You can take a lot of training by Facebook because they really encourage you to get onto the tool.
I'm going to have to really speed through the next
one. Speed through. Okay, nearly at the end. Now let's take Facebook up a notch, look for lookalike audiences, retarget everyone, and use your concept, case study, and creative through the entire journey. As I said earlier, that continuity is going to be really good. In email, just a couple of quick slides to say that I trust a lot of you are already doing email, but email can surprise and delight. It is a fantastic storytelling channel. Charity Water does some of the best storytelling in email that I've ever seen. This is from a website called Really Good Emails. They've got pretty much every email that was ever sent in the history of email and a breakdown of how good or bad they were. I recommend you get on there and have a quick look and see if there's anything you can duplicate or anything that you could really learn from. On the next slide, you'll see a completely different approach from Greenpeace. I loved Greenpeace's emails. They take a less is more approach. So less HTML can sometimes be more impactful. They really focus on a single CTA through the whole email, and they use a lot of non-financial asks. I know that they have petition signatures as a non-financial ask, but really looking for opportunities to engage with people, not just making a financial call to action. And then on the third email example I want to show you is from Sightsavers, where I said earlier about looking for opportunities to add a little extra premium value. So they have this email which shares a video, the chorus of, I can't say that word, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they have this email content that they share, video content. And so in their direct mail pack, they could also put in a variable bit of copy if someone's getting an email saying, by the way, keep an eye on your email inbox. We're sending you that video that I just mentioned. Look for those opportunities, the through lines between the different channels to create a single story for your supporters. On to the next bit, we are at the tail end, but this is about investing in engagement. So on to the next slide. This is some data from the private sector, but there is a link down there. It's from Oracle, who I'm sure you're all aware of. They manage a lot of database products, but essentially to think about, I know that we are very risk averse in our sector and we really need to focus on immediate income, but actually when you look at investing in brand and investing in engagement content, you could be priming someone to give to the next appeal that they get. You're actually building up a relationship with someone. So think about the relationship building every single piece can do. And there's a couple of metrics on screen that you can use to think about the effectiveness of that campaign outside of just the cash money you get. So I put cash revenue at the bottom, but actually there are loads of other metrics. And again, if you want to have a chat about what these metrics are and how to think about them, just get in touch and we can have a talk about it. And then on the next slide, one more thing on engagement. This is an example from Amnesty International looking at two completely different buckets, but on the left is a campaigning ad and on the right is a direct donation ad. It's not about one or the other, one and the other, first one, then the other. It's about working out what's right for you. So look for the engagement content you can use, and then you retarget anyone that does engage with it with a donation ask, as opposed to just going in with a donation ask. The gist is you get a lower CPA on that donation ask because you spent a little extra upfront on the engagement, and overall your CPA will hopefully come in lower through testing and optimization. And then onto the final stretch. Oh, one more thing I wanted to show you, value exchange. This is a way to capture someone's data first and have a digital first approach to the data you're capturing. This is a really great example from the Terence Higgins Trust. You respond to the Facebook ad to get the tote bag. They then have your email, your phone, your home address. And from there, you've actually captured that data first, given them a gift in exchange for it, and then you can move them on into a conversion journey and create a relationship with them. So I just wanted to reflect on this. This goes from this. If you click one more, this is the stuff I've just shown you. This is an example of the kind of relationship you've got with someone where they're moving through different versions of the journey and not just a linear direct to ask journey. That's the magic of digital. It lets you do all of that at a very low cost. Then actually, sorry, I'll race through the end. A few sources. Oh, this is the end. A few resources to help you forecast. So I know it is difficult to get budgets and approval to experiment with channels, particularly in the nonprofit sector. These are a couple of resources that will give you the figures you need to confidently put a plan together and present that to the powers that be to approve a digital plan. So the M&R Benchmarks report has loads on digital performance benchmarks. Rival IQ is a social listening tool for some of the social engagement benchmarks, and then Facebook ad benchmarks. That's from a platform called WordStream that I use a lot because they have a lot of benchmarking they do within the sector as well. So that looks at advertising specifically. Let's chat. If you just go to the next slide for me, Ashby, I am offering 20-minute consultation sessions with anyone who is an Ashby Jenkins webinar attendee. So this is at no cost to you. What we can do is in a 20-minute call, if you've got any immediate concerns or questions or tips or tricks you're after, I can take you through those. But we could look if there's anything extra that you might need or anything I can really help with, some hands-on training or even strategic planning. So if you're on the webinar today, you are welcome to reach out to me. My email address is hello@joshualeigh.online. That is on the slides there, and Ashby will send that around afterwards as well.
Yes.
Reach out and we can get a call in and we can just see what it is you need and how I can really help with your program now.
Perfect. Yeah, I will send around Josh's email CC'd into the wrap-up email along with those slides, so that you've got that all. Someone's just asked if there's a hashtag for the event. We should have set that up. That's not very digital savvy of me, is it?
Hashtag Josh is running out of time. That's the hashtag for the event.
Speedy intro. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and joining. And I'll send all of that round. Do get in touch with Josh. He is such an asset to have, and obviously always full of energy, I promise. So we'll give you loads of advice. And thank you all for coming and joining, and then hopefully we will see you in the future. Josh and I have a few conversations about other plans and more in-depth things. So if there's anything you'd like to see more of from him or I, do let us know. And thank you, and have a lovely day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.